Good afternoon and welcome back to USTA Florida's Here to Serve podcast. My name is Laura Bowen and I'm the Executive Director here at USTA Florida. In today's episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about where education and tennis can intersect to become a powerful force in student-athlete success. Joining me on the podcast today is Dana Andrews, who previously served as USTA Florida's president in 2021 and 2022. Dana is a headlining champion for equity in our section. As part of her work on our board, Dana became a leading advocate for our Women in Tennis initiative. She became a vocal supporter of our Amplify initiative, and most recently, she led our efforts to create the first ever HBCU tennis program grant. Joining Dana and I on the podcast today is a new guest, Tiffany Taylor. Tiffany is a passionate, accomplished, and results-driven professional who has 20 years of experience in the education, nonprofit, and public sector. Tiffany is currently a partner and co-president at the ASU GSV Summit, and she's a partner at GSV Ventures. Today, Tiffany is going to talk about the power of the summit and how partnering with USTA Florida at this year's summit will open doors for students from Florida to gain valuable education and experience that can help them be successful on the court and off. I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast with Tiffany and Dana. Be sure to leave your questions and comments for us on our social media channels and check the links in the pod for more information on the summit and how you can support and attend. Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's wonderful to be here with both of you. Today's podcast is really a kickoff for an exciting partnership that I think will help us unlock access to some outstanding opportunities for university students here in Florida. So to get us started in our conversation today, I'd like to ask each of you about your educational journey and what experiences most contributed to your success today. And Tiffany, as our new guest on the podcast, would you like to start?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'll say, Laura, I love this question because my journey started first and foremost with my parents. I deeply believe parents, family members, and caregivers are a child's first teachers. And that was definitely true for me when I think about my mom and dad. And they may have been young when they had me, but they were my first models of what it meant to have a love for reading and a deep belief in just the power of education, and just were incredibly intentional about instilling in me the understanding that education was the lever that would allow me to grow, excel, and just stand fully in my own greatness. But I also shared it with you that my journey started with my uncle. He was a custodian at Alonzo Bates Academy, which is a school in the Detroit public school system for gifted and talented students. And when I was wrapping up preschool, my parents were planning to send me to our neighborhood school. But my uncle, when he was at work, he overheard that testing for the next kindergarten class is coming up, and he called my mom and said, Tiff is kind of smart. You should see if she can take the test and get in. And he was right. It was a wonderful opportunity. And I'll say, long story short, my mom and dad, they got me signed up. I took the test. I guess I passed because I started kindergarten in that environment, which was just known for its rich culture, high expectations, and a pursuit of rigor. And that really became the foundation for my educational journey. So I went on from Bates to Cass Tech, and that's another school in Detroit. And those experiences, I would say, shaped my pathway and, more importantly, my belief in two things. One, a child's access to a high-quality education should never come down to luck or chance. I shouldn't have had access to a great school simply because my uncle happened to overhear about an opportunity, right? That opportunity should have existed for all students. And the second thing is just that rigor and substance matter. The bar that we set for students, the expectations we hold for them, it shapes what they believe is possible for themselves. So that journey and those beliefs set me on a path to being a classroom teacher, to my work with Teach for America, and ultimately to the role I have now as a leader here at GSV.
Well, we're very lucky that you came to us and in our circle now because you are an incredible human being. And thank you to your uncle for setting you on that path.
Yes.
Dana, would love to hear more about your journey. You shared some of it on a previous podcast, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to share about your educational journey and maybe what experiences most contributed to your success today.
Well, I'll piggyback on what Tiffany shared about the parents because my dad, we had a lot of corporate moves when I was in elementary school. And my mom, made sure that we felt comfortable in the schools that we were in. Certainly, I learned to stand in the front of the class and say, I'm the new student, which really helped kind of frame my personality in terms of being able to make new friends and feel comfortable in a class. And from there, though, I was fortunate enough when we moved to Jacksonville. Again, my parents looked around for the schools, and unfortunately, the public school system was not in a good place at that point. And so my parents did sacrifice financially and put me at Bowles School, where academics and athletics are really set at a high bar. And so that really framed me in terms of being able to be a true student athlete. Um, and so through my tennis, I got to excel at bowls. And from there, I was able to get a scholarship to the University of Georgia. But I really saw college as kind of a holdover because I was blessed that I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Don't ask me why. There are no lawyers in my family. And I will say that as far as experiences that shaped me, it was really my failures. And I had a really good time at the University of Georgia. And so the goal of law school became a little bit more daunting. And I'll never forget, my dad sat me down in my dorm room and he goes, if you think these grades are going to get you to law school and get you through law school, you're sadly mistaken. And so that was a good wake up call for me. And I even had stumbles in law school. But I think part of what I learned on the tennis court, I wasn't the best tennis player, but I never gave up. And I did know that that's exactly where I was supposed to be. And I've now been blessed with a career of 30 years, as my husband will tell me. Every morning I get up and I look in the mirror and I'm happy to go to my job. And so I feel like those different um, bumps in the road ended up working out well for me.
I love that you talked about failure. Tiffany, you talked about access, but you both talked about how those educational experiences have framed your perspectives today. And like both of you, I went to public school. And when it came time for me to go to college, I was not prepared to go to a high level university. And it was very hard the first year that I was there. I felt very uncomfortable. The other students had access to the material prior to coming there that I didn't. And it was so uncomfortable for me that that's shaped my perspective now is that it shouldn't be left up to chance or, how much maybe your parents know. It's a gift when you have those things. But I think the whole idea today is we want to make sure that more people have access and opportunities across the board. So that really brings me to my next question, which is for you, Dana. Our connection with ASU GSV came through a conversation that you had with the ASU GSV Summit co founder and GSV Ventures managing partner, Deb Quazzo, about our recent HBCU tennis program grant work. So, can you share a little bit more about why you are so passionate about the work USTA Florida is doing with HBCUs and how that intersects with GSV's work in the education space?
I'd be happy to. I mean, first of all, in terms of our HBCU initiative and the grants, I do have to say, Laura, you and George Henry, this has been 2 years in the works in terms of educating ourselves on what the HBCUs need in their tennis space. It wasn't just, let's just write a check. It was truly sitting down and starting relationships with these schools, building trust. Um, and so I want to say that from the get go, because I want people who are listening to this understand that work such as this does take time. It is about relationships. So I'll stop there. But in terms of why I'm so passionate about it, again, listening to you and George talk about it, number one. But number two, I mean, for me, tennis has had a huge impact on my life. As I said, it helped chart my college education. And so as I started thinking about how we're working with the HBCUs, number one, I do believe that tennis can make an impact in anyone's life. And we say that our mission is tennis for all. But then when we start thinking about college, that why should a player not have access to play at an HBCU because there's a funding issue? And so I think that's where truly we can make a difference. When I think back in terms of last October, when Deborah and I were texting during Hurricane Milton, and for those of you who don't know, Deborah and I have been the best of friends since we were 12 years old. I told her that I just had my probably favorite day of being a volunteer for USTA Florida, and that was in Jacksonville, and it almost makes me weepy. Um, That was our first grant to Edward Waters, $100,000. And we also honored Mal Washington that same day. And so Deborah was texting me about, was I okay during Hurricane Milton? And I'm texting her about the type of day I just had. And I was safe in South Georgia. And I looked back at the texts this morning, and by October 8th, she and I were already talking about GSV. And I know that then I reached out to you, and I think it was probably October 9th. I got an email meeting Tiffany. And so then we were off to the races. But in terms of, again, going back to the passion, I also think about what USTA Florida's strategic priorities are. And I also think about USTA National, what their strategic priorities are. And in my humble opinion, this initiative hits on all of those. We talk about retaining and getting new and diverse players. This again checks that box. We talk about wanting more diverse coaches, more leadership in our organization and in our ecosystem. Again, we're helping these players in the HBCU space, whether they become coaching leaders, whether they pick another vocation within our sport. By giving them this opportunity, we have a better chance of doing that. I think about facilities. Some of these grants go to these HBCUs to help them either build courts or resurface courts. And I can tell you, some of these schools are in communities that there may not be coaches close by. And so we do have a partnership with them that when the courts are not being used by the players, that community program, girls camps, adaptive camps, again, just the courts being present, adult beginners. So again, I see it meets that need. And then the last thing that really hit me was, why did I get involved in USTA and USTA Florida? Because I loved the sport, what the sport did for me, and I wanted to give back to the sport. So I also see these players, not only are they going to encourage their children to play, I think most people end up playing because someone in their family introduced them to the game. That isn't always the case, but I think it's often the case. And that if you have a heart for service and you love the sport, you're going to look at your sectional leadership and you're going to look at the national program and how you can give back. So hopefully people feel my passion, because I've got it. And in terms of how it intersects with GSV and the summit, the educational part about it, we're talking about student athletes. And in terms of their exposure that they're going to get at this summit, and I can talk more about that later on in the podcast. But one of the quotes I learned from the summit my first year, and it didn't have an author underneath it, but it said, "Nothing resolves everything, but education comes pretty close." And so that's the way I feel. And so for these students, we're helping them in the sport that they love, but also through our partnership with GSV and the ASU Summit, we're also exposing them for their educational journey as well.
Dana, I'm so happy that you talked about why this is so core to our strategic priorities because we often focus so exclusively on tennis player equals work in tennis, right? If you can play tennis on the court, you can work in tennis. And we overlook education, professional development, access, economic opportunity. That really, when students go to college, they're thinking about their careers. And what a beautiful thing if we could say, we're helping you in your career path, and tennis will always be part of your life, whether that's your career path or not. And I love that you connected that back to our mission, our purpose, and our strategic priorities. It's not just the one thing of, okay, get on a court and be a coach, which I think sometimes we think that's the line of connection. It's really all of the things. And I love having this opportunity to have the students really see all of the ways that we're able to open doors for them professionally, personally, through this opportunity. And that really gets me back to asking you my next question, Tiffany. You have such a passion for expanding access through education, and that's really inspiring to me. Can you talk a little bit about how the summit advances opportunities in education and where it can connect with our work in sports?
Yeah, so at the start and end of the day, our vision is to have a world which all people have equal access to the future. And we believe the most powerful lever to make that happen is a high quality education from pre-K to grade. So no matter where you are in your journey, you are always learning. You're acquiring knowledge and applying it. So not just in your own life, but in your family, in your community, and beyond. And at GSV, one of our roles in the broader ecosystem is to create pathways to access. And so the summit is where we bring together leaders from every corner of the work. Policymakers who are shaping the landscape, entrepreneurs who are building platforms and solutions that accelerate learning, investors and philanthropic leaders who are driving resources to move the work forward, and of course, the educators themselves, right? So from superintendents and chief academic officers to university presidents and learning leaders from major companies all around the globe. And the GSV community is really built on this collective of change makers who aren't just thinking about the path forward, Laura, they're taking action. And so I always tell people that at GSV, we are investors, connectors, and conveners. And one of our roles is as conveners is just to bring together people for these 4 days of learning, of meaning making, and of these catalytic moments that lead to real action year round. And for me, that's what makes the summit so special because it's not just about those conversations, it's about the commitments that come from them. And I think about the work that USTA Florida is doing and the impact that it's already having and that it's poised to have. And I just see such a strong connection between our missions and our priorities and our approach. And I'll share with you that I don't have many regrets in life. Again, huge credit to my amazing parents and the educators who shaped me. But if I could go back and do anything over in my childhood, it would have been to have played a sport because of the leadership and the discipline and the strength that comes from athletics. And we know that it just carries far beyond the game itself. And it's not just anecdotal, right? I think Dana talked about some of the amazing leaders and the career paths, but the data has told us that student athletes who receive structured support and leadership development, they not only succeed in sports, but they go on to excel in their careers at higher rates than their peers, right? There's studies that tell us that I think it's what 94% of women
Yes.
they succeed in- we have a background in sports, right? And half of them played at the collegiate level. And we quite honestly, we need that type of talent and leadership and passion in the ed tech and the tech and in the innovation space. So when you ask this question for me, it's clear, right? At the end of the day, our shared commitment is to set up learners for success, both in the classroom and beyond. And if we can lock arms, pairing innovation, education solutions, and opportunities with leadership development opportunities, these young people will be unstoppable, whether they are pursuing athletics at the highest level or stepping into leadership roles in their careers.
Love it. Yes, I'm glad you brought up that statistic on women leaders. We're coming up on Women's History Month, and that's one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is that, the power of sport for girls and women is phenomenal, and happy to see we're going to have so many women student athletes attending the conference this year. Dana, my next question is for you, and we're sort of just going to tackle this head on. Some people might be a little confused as to why USTA Florida is sponsoring this national global event in California. You've been to the summit before. So, can you share more about how attending this event will help our student athletes from FAM and Edward Waters unlock opportunities beyond the classroom and the court? And why is it a key part of our own HBCU initiative?
I'd be happy to. I mean, I could do a whole separate podcast just on the summit, to tell you the truth. Um, and my thought is, in terms of USTA Florida, I've shared with you, Laura, why not do it? This was an opportunity that came to us truly by two best friends texting. And sometimes when opportunities like that come along, yeah, you have to do a deep dive, but you do your due diligence and then you make a decision. And so with this, yes, it started in October. Our final decision was at the end of December, and we did our due diligence, lots of calls, lots of sharing about the summit, what this could do with USTA Florida's HBCU initiative. And it became perfectly clear that if our goal is to help these students in every way possible, but also look beyond USTA Florida, look at this on a national basis, whether it's section by section or, it becomes a sweeping national initiative. This is the way to do it. And it was an opportunity that truly just came along through text messages. So, in terms of what the student athletes will be exposed to, I can say the summit, obviously, I'm not in the education space. And trust me, all my professors would say that for sure. But, but having said that, the summit is one of the most uplifting experiences anyone who attends will ever have. As Tiffany shared, it's from a wide range in the education space. You have the innovators, the investors, and then the leaders, but it can be a leader from a junior college. It can be a leader from one of the Ivy Leagues, but the sense that you get is we are all in this together to make education accessible to everyone. And what do we say about tennis? We want it to be accessible to everyone. What do we say about tennis? It's a sport for a lifetime. They're talking about pre-K to get gray. I mean, it's very much in line. And so now moving forward, what I want to share with everyone is, in terms of our sponsorship that USTA Florida has taken on, we are able to provide 10 scholarships to student athletes from FAMU and Edward Waters. And what these student athletes are going to experience, first of all, as I said, the summit, they're going to be blown away. That's all I can say. But also, they're going to be mentored. They're going to be mentored by other leaders in innovation. They're going to have an opportunity for job shadowing. But I also thought about, too, what I love is the other HBCU students and leaders of the universities that are going to be attending. Think about the camaraderie that they likely have never been exposed to throughout the country. Think about the networking. And so for those young people, I can call them young people now. again, I think that's going to be invaluable. And that part of it, I really hope they embrace. The other part is not knowing we were going to be doing this, but Dr. Michael Lomax, uh, head of United Negro College Fund, he is going to be getting a lifetime award to even be in his presence around him, hear what he has to say. And then again, nothing planned. John McEnroe is going to be there for our tennis student athletes and to hear about his journey. So from that perspective, the mentoring, the camaraderie, just the learning, they're going to learn from amazing authors, people who lead in municipalities, perhaps another sport. So I guarantee these student athletes, it will be an experience of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And the other thing in terms of USTA Florida, it gives us an opportunity to let people know who we are and why are we involved in this. And I think, again, for the sport, for our section, for nationally, why would tennis be getting involved in this? And we will be able to answer that question because we truly care about the student athletes. And we truly care about our sport. We care about making it more diverse. We care about leadership within our sport. So for me, I think, again, that is why we're doing this. We would be crazy not to do it.
I love that, Dana. You kind of touched on my next question a little bit, so that was a good transition. Tiffany, you and your team have done such an amazing job creating a program that features world-class thinkers and speakers. Dana mentioned a few of them in her answer. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about the HBCU program at the summit? What panels and sessions do you have planned? And if people in our listening audience are curious about whether they should be attending,
Mhm.
like what's in it for them if they would like to kind of register for the conference and experience it for themselves?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the HBCU initiative, and I will just like start to say that it's rooted in what we always come back to, access and opportunity. And as Dana mentioned, and as we've been talking about through this entire conversation, it's not just about making sure HBCU students and leaders are just in the room, but for us, it's really making sure that they are fully engaged in the conversation shaping the future of education, innovation, and workforce development. And I know Dana has talked a lot about Deborah Quazzo, who is our fearless leader. But over a decade ago, Deborah recognized the importance of honoring innovators of color and creating a platform to
Mhm.
amplify their impact. And what that commitment, which it started as just celebrating visionary leaders, what it's grown into is really not just recognizing today's change makers, but also building a pipeline for the next generation of entrepreneurs and educators and innovators of color. And so as we thought about how to just take this work to the next level, we leaned on the wisdom and experience of some of our partners in the space. So President Michael Sorrell at Paul Quinn College, Kaya Henderson, Adrienne Reidner, Carlos Moreno, Henry Hicks, Jeff Livingston, and our longtime partners at Russell Reynolds. And we just kept asking ourselves, like, how do we create meaningful pathways? And again, we just kept coming back to the same answer, access and opportunity. And so that's where the initiative was born. And as Dana mentioned, because of our partnership with USTA Florida, we've been able to not only provide scholarships for students from, Edward Waters and FAMU and 9 other institutions across the country to join us at the summit, but we'll also be hosting a breakfast reception that brings together the HBCU students, presidents, philanthropic leaders, and industry change makers to really connect and engage. And As Dana mentioned, we're honoring Dr. Lomax with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he'll be at that reception. And then throughout the summit, we will have opportunities for the students to connect with EdTech entrepreneurs and funders and business leaders so that they have they walk away from the experience with tangible next steps and relationships that can shape their path forward. We've also curated key conversations across multiple stages that will highlight the critical role HBCUs are playing in driving innovation and economic mobility, and not just in education, but across all industries. And then we really are excited about the work that would happen post the summit, right? Those job shadowing opportunities, those opportunities to understand the entrepreneur landscape and what is venture capital. And when I have my next brilliant idea, what does it mean for me to like get that business off the ground and to get it funded? And so this initiative isn't just about showing up at the summit, Laura. It's really about making sure HBCU students and leaders are fully engaged and deeply connected and positioned for the long term. And we're just really excited to build on this foundational year and create lasting impact for years to come.
I'm glad you mentioned that what happens after the summit is as important or almost more important than what happens there. That was one of the big hurdles that we had when trying to really help people understand why this was such an important opportunity for us. Is it wasn't just about the summit itself, it was about the opportunities that would be unlocked for these students and for us to meet people and engage after that, so we could really unlock those economic opportunities and other things that the students will need to become the next leaders in, whether it's tennis or education or any pathway that they choose. So thank you for mentioning that. I do want to highlight a few of the other speakers that I think we've been partnering on. And Dana, you specifically have invited some of our tennis and local leaders to join the summit as presenters. What perspectives do you expect Mal Washington, Megan Moulton Levy, and Charles Griggs to bring to this audience that might be new and different from what they've heard before?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank GSV in terms of being partners, of reaching out to you and I, Laura. And, did we have speakers that we would be interested in coming to the summit? And I'm very grateful to the three you just named that they probably felt like I was stalking them, but they all three did accept. And so, in terms of Mal Washington and Charles Griggs, they will actually be on the stage together. And in Florida, Mal is very well known, but just to touch on what he is doing in the education space in Jacksonville with his foundation. He's a former professional tennis player, former Olympian. He started a foundation to introduce tennis to the lower income children in Jacksonville. His foundation is right in the heart of a very struggling neighborhood, but he quickly learned that it was a lot more than tennis than that these students needed. And so he now has an after school program basically from pre-K to grade, pre-K to seniors in high school. And what Mal is doing through the education space, teaching them about finances. And of course, one of the statistics that I share with everyone about Mal's foundation is 100% of those children graduate on time if they go through his program. I mean, that's incredible. So Mal is going to be on the stage with Charles Griggs, and Charles Griggs is in the community department with the city of Jacksonville. And I got to meet Charles because he came out for our Edward Waters grant presentation. And that was the first time I met him. I stalked him through email. He came. And what I found out was that Charles himself had attended the summit. We weren't even talking about, Deborah and I weren't even talking about the summit at that point. And so Charles shared with me how much he enjoyed it. The mayor of Jacksonville has actually been a speaker at the summit. And so Charles, he has brought back to Jacksonville this program called Journey Forward. And it is about working with kids. It first came about several years ago because of the crime rate. And then it dissolved along the way. and he was very involved in it previously. So the mayor has now brought him back. The Journey Forward is back, and it deals with literacy. The kids when they're at home from 3 to 5 and have no one to really engage with them, how they can work through that space. So I think Charles and Mal together can talk about how someone, with the foundation, and how can the city team up with them and continue to build on this together. And then the other speaker, Megan Moulton Levy, who I absolutely adore, hug, hug, kiss, kiss. She is a former professional tennis player, college player, heart of gold, heart for service. She's actually on the USTA national board. I did want to point out that she won 2 times the ITA Arthur Ashe Award for leadership and sportsmanship. So, you really don't need to say a whole lot more than that. But Megan is going to be involved in another conversation, and I think from her perspective as college athlete, she now works. She's a vice president of an organization called JTCC, which stands for Junior Tennis Champion Center. But what I love about this center is they go into low income communities to put on tennis programs, to introduce the game. They do a lot of adaptive play. And then they do have a program for maybe kids that wouldn't have been able to afford the tennis path, because we all know it can be expensive. And they bring in those players that may not have had an opportunity. They have school there at their campus, and the colleges that these children end up going to play. Yes, it is the Harvards, the Yales, the UNC Chapel Hill. So I feel like her organization covers the gamut. And what will become very apparent about Megan is heart for service, humble servant, and intelligent, kind. So I can't wait to hear her input from the sports perspective and the education perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. I couldn't have picked 3 better people to be representing sort of the tennis, the education, the finance, the business space. And, thank you to all of them, as you said, for agreeing to join us in this journey. My last question for each of you as we close out today, and maybe I'll start with you, Tiffany, and then we'll close with Dana, is what is one thing each of you hopes to see come out of our partnership and why? So, Tiffany, you're up first, and then Dana, you'll bring it home.
Okay, so again, I love this question. But I think I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna give you 2 things because so first, I just really hope this is the beginning of a sustained partnership. So often partnerships like this launch with just incredible momentum, but the real impact, as we've talked about today, comes when we commit, right, for the long haul. So my hope is that this isn't just a moment, but it's a movement. And then that through our work together, that we're creating like those ongoing opportunities for HBCU students connected to USTA Florida, and then for HBCU students across the country, and ensuring they have access to learning and mentorship and career pathways in the ed tech and in the innovation space. And the second is this, and I hope that we are truly able to model what it means to create real access and opportunity for all. And what I mean by that is that we're being intentional about opening doors and opening windows and making sure students from HBCUs or Hispanic serving institutions or minority serving institutions and indigenous and rural communities, right? Students who might not have had access and exposure to this ecosystem, just that they know that their voices and perspectives and their brilliance, right, is welcomed in these spaces, but they're needed. So if we can sustain this partnership and grow it and deepen it and help students truly see and own their place in this work, then I think we will know that we've done something meaningful, and I would be able to confidently say, well done to USTA Florida and the ASU GSV Summit.
Excellent. Dana, what would you add? What would you hope to see come out of our partnership and why?
Well, when we talk about sustained partnerships, I truly think about Deborah and I. We have been sustained partnerships since we were 12 years old, encouraging each other along the way. We took very different paths, but never stopped encouraging one another and what we wanted to do. And so, Tiffany, forewarning again, Deborah and I have been partners since we were 12. So if I live that long, it'll be
To get rid of, Tiffany, just so you know.
But in terms of what I personally would like to see out of it, everything that Tiffany said, because I do totally agree. Just like our grants with the HBCUs, my biggest part of that was that we are not just handing you a check. We are here for you with questions, guidance, etc. I feel that way about our partnership with ASU GSV. I truly would love to see this as a national initiative. And I think this is the first step towards that, because for these students that we're bringing from Florida to have this exposure again to this education space and the other HBCUs, again, not feeling like you're on an island, that this is a community, and it's a community that wants to support each other moving forward. How can we make it better? And so, yeah, I see it as the best outcome would be what we do afterwards and how we continue to grow it in the sense, not just numbers, but creating leaders, and leaders who are confident, and leaders that know that we are here for them.
Well said. And if there's one thing that I could say I really would like to see come out of our partnership is just to show other people that when you look outside your own sphere, that's a lot of times when the real growth can happen. And I hope that this might allow us to build other partnerships with organizations outside of tennis that can also help expand access and opportunity for the people that we are serving. So hopefully coming out of this, people will see the magic that can happen when you have organizations that share a common goal and when they work together and they have that passion and commitment. So that's one thing that I would hope to see out of this, and maybe we do more things like this together. So with that, I want to thank you both for joining me today and having such a wonderful conversation. I know that our audience will learn more about the summit and the work that we're doing in the coming weeks and months. But to both of you, thank you for being leaders in this space, and thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and time with me.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
That's all for this edition of the Here to Serve podcast. For more information on USTA Florida's HBCU tennis grant, and to find out how you can support and attend the ASU GSV Summit, check out our website and social media channels. And for more information on the podcast, including upcoming topics, dates, and guests, visit USTAFlorida.com/here to serve.